time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time.
Good afternoon and welcome. Thanks everyone for being here. It's really great that we could all come. And we do remind you for mobiles, if you could have them switched off, as it does interfere with our recording. And we're on air, so that's the sign up there to say we're on air. That means you can be sitting at home and listening as well, which I'm sure some of you have done in the past, but we welcome those that may be listening online as well. So please be seated. Thank you. So in opening the meeting, I have an apology from Councillor Spencer. Councillor Spencer's in the hospital at the moment, having an operation. So we feel for him at this time. A declaration of interest. Any declaration of interest? No? Confirmation of minutes. Somebody happy to move the minutes of the meeting held the 30th of May? Deputy Mayor, thank you. And Councillor Finlay. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That's all councillors present. That is carried. We have no deputations. We have no official petitions, but we'll have one presented a bit later on as well. So first of all, we have a community report from Ms Elizabeth Skirving, Chief Executive Officer of Rural Business Tasmania. So welcome, Elizabeth, and we look forward to hearing what you have to tell us.
Thank you, Mayor.
3 questions.
All good?
Yeah, sorry, fire away.
Rural Business Tasmania is a not-for-profit charitable organisation that many of you may have heard of in the past. We have been providing business and financial management expertise to the rural community, including our rural financial counselling service, so those farmers and farm businesses that are in crisis, so the floods of 2016, the current East Coast dry, bushfires. We provide specialist financial counsellors that go out and work on farm with the farmers to look at their business, so their financial position, succession planning, mediation with banks, and that is part of a federal government program that there are 12 services nationwide that provide that. We also have a number of other initiatives that we are supported by state government particularly in providing support and learning opportunities to enable our farming community to deal with the demands of running a rural and a small business. So very much passionate about how we support those small rural and regional businesses, how we allow them to prosper. So we have a leadership program at the moment that provides workshops with expertise for some of those younger leaders in the community that are providing the opportunities going forward. We also have a charitable fund that provides support to those in crisis. So we're very much open to ideas of how we support regional community, how we work towards making sure that our farming community, which is so much a part of Northern Tasmania and our Launceston City Council, and is the backbone of what has been for a number of decades and years. So whatever we can do to support those farmers, but it is very much about working on the business rather than in the business, and that's a mantra that we have. And something that perhaps small businesses, even in the city centre, need to actually spend a little bit more time on. You know, have you got your finances in order? Have you got your insurances in order? Are you actually doing that business planning with cash flows and everything that perhaps get forgotten when there are so many other demands of a technical nature in actually providing the services? And you're meant to be, you know, Joe Blow doing every single thing that the human resources, marketing department, finance department of a larger organisation would do. So where we can support those small businesses and advocate for support through national and state areas, we will do that. And thank you very much for your time. For anyone that is interested, Anthea has got some documents for us so that you can have a look at that, and we'd love to talk to anyone that has that interest going forward. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Elizabeth. Thank you very much for coming and presenting. Appreciate that. Thank you for the work you're doing in the community as well. It's really appreciated. So now we move on to public question time. Public questions on notice is there with an answer. Then we have public questions without notice. Any public questions without notice?
Yes, thank you. Ron Baines, ratepayer, Kings Meadows. A friend and I visited the basin area to check out the refurbishment. This was a week or so ago, and I will say you've made a great job of fixing something that wasn't actually broken. However, we have a health and safety issue up there. Where we were unable to sit on the grass due to it being covered with wallaby excrement, and we soon left the area. I do have a solution. We could employ a couple of hunters, professional hunters, for 7 nights, and that should act as a deterrent. If the council wishes, I could put you in touch with a couple of professional hunters. Would the council like me to do that?
I don't think so. I think we'll take the question and I'll let our staff have heard that question and we'll take it on board. Thank you. To see what we can do.
Second question. Some time ago, I asked this council what was being done to stop the tonnes of recyclable material at the truck face being bulldozed in and wasted. I was told a solution would be found within 12 months, and I believe that time has expired, or it's very close. Do we at this time have a solution to this problem?
Oh, we've made a number of changes. I don't know whether somebody wants to go through all the changes we've made in the last couple of years to recycling, including FOGO, which is in there as well.
Well, we continue to invest and work with commercial industries around improving their recycling.
Sorry, I can't hear you. Could you,
Sorry. So councils through the Northern Waste Management Group continue to work with the commercial sector to improve their recycling. And at the end of the day, our principle is actually to minimise the consumption of materials, not to be and put our effort into that space. In terms of the commercial stuff coming through, it's actually a space that council don't have a lot of policy position in, because it's managed by the private industry. So we are investing in sorting waste that's coming through the transfer station. We have invested in the food organics significantly, and we're working with the CBD to roll that out through the commercial area. And we are currently working also on how we can better sort demolition waste. But the solution is not just for council, it's actually it's for community and industry as a whole to develop a more sustainable solution to waste management.
Thank you.
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions at this stage of the meeting?
Mr Mayor, Alderman, Lionel Morrell, representing the Tasmanian Ratepayers Association Incorporated. A question of the General Manager. Is it true that negotiations and discussions have commenced with the owner of Glebe Farm to compulsorily acquire a section of the farm for car parking for the University of Tasmania Inverest campus?
General Manager.
I can categorically say that's not true.
Thank you.
So are there any other questions? Because I have some questions here. The person who's Martin.
Pardon me, I was just trying to transfer it from my electronic.
Oh, you're right. Just to make sure you didn't forget.
Trying to device off. It means I won't be able to resource the question.
Oh, you want the copy?
Yeah, could I do that?
Oh, I don't mind.
Thank you. Device being transferred. Okay. In regards to the Gorge Hotel, does with the 12-metre height limit give the council arbitrary right to defer this proposal?
I don't look. All the questions are going to be the same answer, which I'll give you. That the matters will be considered by the councillors when we have the debate, which will be. But Sorry?
I'm sorry, that was a specific question. Does it have the right to defer because of the 12-metre height?
Well, any councillor has the right to do that if they want it.
So you have the right to defer?
I would have thought if they really want to defer the matter, they can. That's up to the councillors. General Manager, want to comment?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So in respect of, I think you're referring to the proposed height controls or that would be introduced into the scheme at a later date. Is that right?
No, at the moment I was led to believe that there's a 12-metre
Oh, yes, so you're talking...
And the building is 39 metres. I was just, because of the height...
Yeah, so that's the discretion.
Yeah.
They do have the capacity to defer because of that.
Well, there is a discretion in there, so...
Yes.
In the current scheme, there is a discretion to go above that height.
Wonderful. So, with the other questions being in regard to that hotel, do you want me to continue?
You're allowed to read them, but yep.
All right. Has the hotel been designed with water conservation and reuse to save the water?
Yeah, look, that'll all come out in the debate as we have the discussion. Thank you.
So, can I read this?
Yeah, you get the same answer, but you can read it.
Okay. And can the council guarantee that this hotel will not inversely impact on the potential of there being an effluent shitstorm around King Park at high tide, so it gets known as King Park tide?
Yeah, these are the matters the council will obviously consider when we debate the item very shortly. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Good afternoon, Alderman. Kelvin Jowett, 112 Peel Street, Launceston. Question number 1. When is the walkway in Benall Way to be restored?
We'll take that on notice, I think, and get back to you. Yep, thank you.
Second one, has the design engineer signed off on the completed flood levies in Launceston?
Design engineer. We'll take it on notice again. Is it design engineer or an engineer?
The design engineers. It's outside engineers.
Director Eberhardt can answer that one, so that's good.
The flood levies are considered a dam and therefore regulated by Department of Primary Industries. So we've had a permit to construct the levies, and we've satisfied all the conditions of that permit, which includes a number of things we have to go through to demonstrate that they're fit for purpose and being built appropriately.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you. So under the provisions of the Land Use Planning and Approvals Act, Council acts as a planning authority in regards to the items listed under agenda item 8, the Planning Authority. So the first item is 8.1. We have a number of speakers. General Manager, if you could read out the rules, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. So only residents and ratepayers or those on the City of Launceston electoral roll may address an item on the agenda. Before speaking, please state your name and address or property owned in Launceston. You may speak for up to 2 minutes. No extension of time is permitted. You must speak for or against the recommendation, not ask questions of councillors or council officers, nor attempt to enter into debate with councillors or council officers. Statements can only be made either directly relating to supporting the recommendation or arguing against it. Comments and statements are not to be defamatory, offensive or abusive, or be designed to embarrass any person, including councillors or council officers. Statements are not to be repetitive of statements or points already made. Several people speaking a common position should nominate a single speaker on their behalf. The Mayor may ask a member of the gallery to cease speaking if the above procedures are not followed. Following the hearing of the comments from the gallery, councillors will then consider the item.
Thank you, General Manager. The first speaker I have is Neil Gross.
Thank you, Mayor. Neil Gross, Launceston Chamber of Commerce. This development is a fantastic example of how significant development should be progressed by a developer and is strongly supported by the Launceston Chamber of Commerce. This project complies with the performance criteria as required by the planning scheme for buildings over the acceptable solutions height. It shows a strong commitment by the developer to produce a building of significant design merit through a competitive design process, a process which the Chamber strongly supports. It's been through a rigorous assessment process by council officers who have recommended that it be approved. Significantly, from a Chamber of Commerce point of view, it is a $50 million private investment in this city which lifts the bar in terms of tourism development, social amenity, but importantly also, in our view, design excellence, and we would recommend Council in their capacity as a planning authority to approve of the development application. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Collier.
I'm Jim Collier. I live at 39 Beach Road, Lagana. Is it okay for me to continue?
I'll allow you to continue then.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors, I'm opposed to this building, and I ask you to look into your hearts and examine your consciences when you vote on this. This has the potential to destroy at least one family in the immediate area, and I ask you to seriously consider it. Why do I ask you to seriously consider it? Mr Errol Stewart recently floated the idea of building 2 tower units on King's Wharf. They would be approximately 40 metres high, close to the silos. Mr Stewart said that he wants to space these tower units 80 metres apart, at least 80 metres apart from each other and the hotel. Why did he do that? Because one 40-metre tower will overshadow the others. What on earth do you think this proposed hotel will do to other small buildings approximately 7, 8, 10 or 12 metres high in the immediate vicinity? It will blot them out completely. You must think about this very seriously. It could have serious, and I mean serious, mental problems for the immediate or the residents living in immediate properties. Please examine your hearts and consciences before you vote, and hope you can sleep at nights. You could destroy families living in the immediate area. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Collier.
Good afternoon. I'm Linda Collier and I live at 39 Beach Road, Lagana. Am I allowed to continue?
Yes, you will allow you.
Thank you.
As long as you don't repeat what's been said, it's add new things, that'll be good.
Sorry? Sorry, I beg your pardon?
Just to add new information and don't go over the old information.
I understand. I oppose this building because it's too high, it's in the wrong place and it's the wrong building for that place. I also oppose this building because of sewerage. I'm very, very worried about the sewerage system, which is inadequate at the moment to take the amount of sewerage we are putting into it, and it goes into the river. And if we get all these extra people flushing out sewerage, how are we going to cope with our poor river? It's a beautiful river, and it really is it's a crime to do what we're doing to it. And please, could somebody, if they're going to build buildings that put out so much sewage, can we at least try and get our sewage system sorted out and corrected? Please, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Joanne Saunders.
Hello, Jo Saunders, 19 Anderson Road, Trevelyan. I don't think this development is compatible, so I'm against it. Compatible with the streetscape nor the character of the area. It's way too big, way too shiny, and it's in conflict with the current character of the area. The developer argues that there's no prevailing character, but there is. The prevailing character is that beautiful natural basin there, the gorge nearby. They draw upon the gorge to say, oh, look, the hotel we're making it look like the gorge somehow. So they're acknowledging the prevailing character is the gorge and what is there nearby. People come to Launceston to see the gorge. They come here to see our beautiful low-rise streetscape. I came here years ago as a tourist and I came to live here for these reasons. And I think that we are in great danger that if we go ahead and build something of this magnitude, we set precedent, number one, and two, you are basically going to kill the goose that lays the golden eggs, that makes this place an absolutely gorgeous place to come and visit, tourism, and to come and live and work, as I have done. There's been studies and consultations done. As ratepayers, we've paid a lot of money for the likes of Jan Gell and Paul Davies to look at building heights, massing studies, the like, and it all keeps coming back. Keep it low rise. Keep this place intact. We are a unique city in Australia. We're unique, in fact, around the world. We have this beautiful intact Victorian streetscape. Let's not balls it up. Thanks.
Thank you. Can I just remind the audience there's no cheering and clapping or saying those sort of comments. We're here to respect one another and we just let the person speak and we don't interject at all or make comments. Otherwise, we'll ask you to leave. Thank you. Martin Cole.
Hello, Martin Cole. I reside at 36 Punchbowl Road, Punchbowl. Hello to everyone. I don't know what the nickname of this new building is going to be, with the height of it, with the effluent flow, with the king tide, the catastrophe of it in May last year at high tide and the floods. And for tourists to come down because of what has been colloquially known as shit towers that's been proposed, 100 toilets going off at the one time and then flushing out into King Park, it's a concern. But that as an analogy, as it has also been made in respect to the traffic that will be flowing into a major congestion point and the consideration of two educational places next to it, that this is going to be incredibly awkward if we look to the next 10 and 20 years and this needs to be considered. So if we look at this in terms of a more staggered skyline at this locality and a better traffic outflow and a better effluent outflow, so maybe we could withhold this as you have the right to do. So consideration of height and infrastructure could be much more developed. So the overall character and the character of Launceston as a considered caring and understanding development with lower heights and infrastructure, I think everyone will applaud the Act of Council looking to the long term and investing in the future.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Kirsten Mills.
Kirstine Mills. I live at 7 Mirabelle Street in South Launceston. Mr Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, I am opposed to this development. I don't understand why the ratepayers and occupants of Launceston are going to lose, potentially, our view of the river. Why are we employing somebody to come in and take money from tourists to look at our river? I would like to see the 12-metre limit on buildings around the river basin so that all of Launceston can enjoy those river views that supposedly the international hotel operators require. Outstanding river and city views. We pay the rates and enjoy this beautiful city and the river. When I look out my windows every morning, I see the river in all its glory. If this proposal goes ahead, when I look out my windows, I will see a big white block. That's from my house. I don't deny that this planning of the hotel, I actually, when I first saw it, thought it was quite a beautiful building, and I don't mind the actual development, but just not in that place. It will block the views of the river and it will block the views of the gorge from people in various locations. There was nothing in the application showing the visual impact from South Launceston area. The photos that were shown in the application were shown from the river, showing that there was no inhibiting views of key landscape features. Well, from South Launceston, there is inhibition of views, the river and the gorge. Please, I ask you to, I concur with what everybody before me has said in regard to this application.
Yeah, thank you. Your time is up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ken Partridge.
Ken Partridge, West Launceston. Mayor, Deputy Mayor, councillors. I've asked the staff to circulate with all of you with 2 pieces of paper. One, if you've done your homework and paid us the courtesy of reading our representations, you would have already dealt with. But the second one would be new to most of you. I'm including it here because it's very relevant. It deals with the same subject matter, which is traffic, chaos, traffic virtually out of control. And the second one, which I would like to take you through, as I say, you should have had the first one in your heads. Have Your Say was put out by the state government, and I managed to get in the nick of time. And I had my say as a general user of the southern outlet. The southern outlet, because of its profile, is intrinsically prohibitive in terms of heavy traffic. And those heavy vehicles, one is going to be the cause of a major disaster. I understand that there's something like 137 accidents on the southern outlet this last year. I personally saw a body lying down, and I couldn't do anything about it because the traffic was streaming hither, thither and yon. Either way, I'm proposing, as a result of both of those pieces of paper, and I've highlighted it for you.
Your time's up, thank you. Sorry, your time is up. Okay.
That we have a moratorium.
Thank you. Rosalind Ives.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm short. I'm going to mix the sweet with the sour. The sweetness is the Charles Street, the Charles as we know it, brilliant use of design, fits into the landscape, and I don't think there would be anyone in this room that wouldn't say, wow, thank you for doing that. Second thing, Grindelwald. Down in the valley, doesn't really in keeping with our Launceston landscape or heritage, but it certainly appeals to many visitors. Another good thing. Now for the sour. The Gorge Hotel, which I oppose. By the way, my name's Rosalind Ives and I live at 61 Connaught Crescent, West Launceston. It is, as people have said, wrong building, wrong place. Make some changes in height and the location, and I think people would more or less support it. Traffic may be a good thing if it becomes too congested, because then it would solve that issue that was discussed way back about having a cable car from the hotels into the gorge, into the basin. Maybe that's something that was considered in the planning. I say it's not your gorge, it's our gorge, and it's not for sale. So if there were plans afoot to develop further into the gorge, I would be dismayed. It's a hideous design in my thinking, and it's not in keeping with our heritage landscape. We are a small urban city. We are a loved city. I have met many visitors through the Information Centre as a volunteer at the Cataract Gorge, and not one of them has mentioned their accommodation. All of them mention how blessed are you to have this urban bushland, how blessed are you to have this intact. We can walk around the streetscapes.
Thank you.
It's uninterrupted.
Thank you. Your time is up. Lou McInnes.
Being smaller than 12 metres, this proposal must satisfy the performance criteria, and they are that the building height must be compatible with the streetscape and character of the surrounding area, and that there must be regard for the topography of the adjacent areas, the height of the adjacent buildings, the height when viewed from roads and public spaces, and the overshadowing of adjoining public space. It's regard for these things. We argue this 39-metre hotel proposal is not compatible with the streetscaping character of the surrounding area. Whilst in consultations have repeatedly and overwhelmingly argued for retaining our heritage buildings and low to mid-rise building heights that form the unique character of our city. The Reimagining the Gorge document says that any adjacent accommodation to the gorge must be low impact and sensitive to the environment. This proposal is not low to mid-rise and it's definitely not low impact. That it must have regard for the topography of the adjacent areas. The proposal will severely interrupt the sweeping topography across Launceston Valley between Windmill Hill and West Launceston Hillside, as featured in all the historical drawings of Launceston. That it must have regard for height when viewed from roads and public spaces. When I walk or drive down the valley on hill day or night, I love looking at the riverscape view, edged by interesting buildings and bridges and buildings that are no taller than the trees in front of them and the parklands. This huge hotel, presumably lit at night, will interrupt and completely dominate this beautiful and gentle river scene. 39 metres, it will tower over Kings Park and dominate the view from Royal Park and from the river itself. Please respect what we have long valued and want for the future of this place, and that is to feature our natural and heritage values, not have them literally dwarfed by such a...
Thank you. Your time is up as well. Julianne Richards.
Julianne Richards. I live 10 Wheaton Street, Lagana, and so...
Yeah, I'll rule out. Thank you.
I just would like to endorse the previous speaker. I'll keep it short and sweet like that.
Oh, thank you. Well done. Estelle Ross. Oh, sorry, Ruth Hall. Sorry, I'm out of order.
Ruth Hall, 13135 Patterson Street. If I could seek council's, just to allow me, if you could, if I repeat anything but from a residential perspective.
Okay.
Okay. I've lived at the site for more than 10 years. Council 11 years ago supported a 15-apartment complex, residential. Bring your family in, come live in this city, bring your new money in. I've done that. 9 years ago, a 20-apartment complex on Brisbane Street, again supporting the strong, historic, continuous residential presence, not built because of the global financial crisis, and not only a few years ago, Susie Kay's home on top of the Chinese restaurant, one floor. 12 metres, mixed urban use, low impact, works really well. We are connected to a residential community. A structure such as is proposed through DA will totally sever the residents from the rest of our micro community. That's what gives us our sense of place, our sense of well-being, our sense of community, daily contact. The ground is not stable. It moves constantly in a very low way. But when the car park was built on the side where the Penny Royal complex starts, just from loading one truck, the shift was so severe it severed the metal staircase, just ripped it through. The region will not support the rigour of such a build. You are looking at 15 homes, plus Susie's on the corner, and those adjacent. The ground is not stable. Traffic is a nightmare. Just looking out on my balcony, I can see nothing but traffic way beyond my point of view. And it's not just early in the morning,
Yep.
it is continuous.
Thank you. Your time is up. Estelle Ross.
Estelle Ross from Diana Court, Riverside. I just want to reiterate what people have already said, so I won't go over it again, but the only thing that hasn't been mentioned is that this area is on an earthquake fault line. So I'd just like to make that aware to all the members of the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Bonnie Redburn.
frog in my throat now. Sorry. I would just like to know why the council has actually changed the height and heritage regulations to build an ostentatious hotel that is totally out of character with the gorge entrance and also at the expense and peril of those adjoining homes and businesses. And to remind council that they represent the will of the people, and a lot of people are unaware of the extent of this and really should have had a chance to have an input into whether this goes ahead or not.
Thank you. Lionel Morell.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Lionel Morell, but representing the Heritage Protection Society Tasmania Incorporated. My private address is 41 High Street, Launceston. This development does not comply with the performance criteria in the planning scheme. It's an invalid advertising process, and the matter you have before you today will be demonstrated that in a subsequent appeal. We have advised you of this. It's been advertised 3 times already, and there are still faults with the process. However, the inability of councillors to act independently as a planning authority in this matter is also brought into question. Proponents boasted in the press in December 2018, when this application was first unveiled, that it would dominate the area, whereas the application would lead us to believe the 39-metre tower would be invisible. It's the wrong building in the wrong place. It couldn't have selected a worse or less stable site for a 39-metre building in Launceston. The parking provisions are hopelessly inadequate, do not comply with the planning scheme provisions, and it is wedged next door to a very hostile service station, which is the most dangerous facility to have at the foyer of a major hotel. The present use of the land is for a public car park, and the general manager of the proponents' company said in this very chamber that this parking area, when it was approved in 2016, is an important facility, not only for the Pennyroyal or accommodation restaurants, but also for the students at the college by taking pressure off other areas. He assured council the application was not part of the group's plans for a hotel or function centre. The existing public car park is critical and the 89 spaces are important. The last thing Launceston needs to be is like all other aspiring cities in the world. We have a different requirement. The building is too tall. The maximum height on this site is actually the podium level. Now, I don't know if anyone realises how
your time's
high
up. Thank
12
you.
metres is, but I suggest you try and measure it if you don't want to listen to the public.
Thank you. Your time is up. Susie Carr, Sarah.
Hello, I'm Susie. I live at the corner, so all this building is going around where I live. I've written it out, so I'll just read this, okay? I object, of course. I believe that the building is in no way compatible in height with regards to the surrounding area. The developer's planning assessment in relation to standard 15.4.1 Part 1 has relied on 2 cases, Henry Design and Consulting versus Clarence City Council and Flood versus Georgetown Council. However, the developer has overlooked the tribunal's decision in both these cases that compatibility requires consistency as stated in Henry Design and Consulting. Consistent with the approach taken in Flood, the tribunal holds that compatibility in the contents of the present hearing requires a finding that the proposal is consistent with the density of the surrounding area, not necessarily the same density, but at least similar to or in harmony or broad correspondence with the surrounding area. In both Flood and Henry, the tribunal compared the density of the proposed development with the density of the surround areas, a radius of 100 metres. It was noted that the proposed density was highly divergent from both the mean and median densities in these areas. The proposed development is not consistent with the average height of the adjacent or adjoining building and is proposed to be almost double the height of the tallest local building. Applying the principle of the findings in the Flood and Henry Design and Consulting, the development cannot be considered compliant with 15.4.1 Part 1C. In regards to Part 1E, the developer's assessment is highly selective in terms of the vantage points it chooses for consideration apparent height. The apparent height of the proposed development would appear to be much higher than Launceston College if viewed from the western end of Patterson Street looking east. The development will not only dominate the local building, but most likely a large proportion of Launceston itself. I just have a picture to show quickly. In today's Examiner, they printed this and said my petition was not valid. Now, if you have a look, the hotel is 40 metres. The Launceston College is 20. Look at the picture.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you. Order, please. We still speaking or?
Oh, my husband. Sorry.
Yeah.
This is my husband, and he did a speech. I thought I'd get 4 minutes
Yep.
to translate the bit because you said I couldn't. I translated it yesterday.
Yep. No, happy for that.
Okay. Starting?
Yes.
Okay. If this goes ahead, they will put our family in danger, slowly killing us with excess carbon monoxide. The damp, moisture and mould as our family outdoor recreational area will not see sunlight for a good half a year. There's no sunlight to evaporate the rain or melt the frost. 2 of my 3 children have asthma, and this is not healthy for them to live like mushrooms. We don't want our little 3-year-old growing up with health problems because the council doesn't care about people. When we start building, they will interrupt our sleep and rest as we work from 5 o'clock at night to 2, 3 in the morning and normally sleep into midday. From experience of their last project, they start work at 6 a.m. So for the next 2 or 3 years of construction, we'll be surviving on 3 to 4 hours sleep. They will damage our houses, homes and the neighbouring properties, as they've already done so when they demolished the houses next door, making the car park. And to this day, they still have not rectified. When we applied to build our home above the shop in 2012, we had to prove that we didn't take away the solar amenity of the neighbouring property. Then why should the hotel have the right to take away the solar amenity of our home and business? At the time of our application, we were required to have open outdoor space for sunlight. Why is it now that we have no right to it? Other areas we had to comply with to get our application approved was Art Deco and privacy, which this hotel does not have to comply with. How is that fair? 3 years ago, all but one alderman voted to have this car park next door approved, saying that Launceston really needed this extra car park. So why is it now it is okay to replace this much needed car park with a hotel that adds more stress to the shortage of parking spaces in this area? So if you vote in favour of this development, then it's just not good enough. You are not looking out for the best interests of your ratepayers and concerned citizens, because you are just approving everything these rich people are asking for, whether it's demolishing the beautiful heritage houses to put in such a needed car park, and now to replace this so much needed car park with a not so needed hotel. So why do we have to live in fear because the rich are exempted from the rules and regulations that we the poor have to comply with? How is that fair? That's from him. Okay?
Thank you. No, thank you very much. So we got Lillian Sy. Yeah, I'll do that next. Sorry.
Hello, I am Lillian and one of the asthmatic children that live at 22 Margaret Street. Now, I've also written out my speech. So, due to the 19-year lease on the service station, the live fuel tanks underneath will not be removed during the initial stages of construction. Instead, the grounds around the tanks will be piled so that the weak foundations can actually support the weight of this 9-storey building. As quoted by an insurance assessor, if anything happens to those tanks, nobody would be safe within 3 blocks. I hope that there will be sufficient precautions to ensure that the live tanks they'll be building around will not be ruptured, and that the safety of the thousands of LC, TAFE and Sacred Heart students, as well as all other pedestrians, residents and tourists within the 3-block radius will be safe. This new hotel is not worth risking the lives and safety of all these people, especially considering that there's already so many other available accommodation, such as the Silos, the Art House Hotel, and all the other accommodation available within the CBD. In all of Australia, Tasmania is ranked 2nd lowest in education. This development will only have detrimental effects on the LC students' education and TCE scores. Students will be discouraged from pursuing a quality secondary education at LC, as well as the enrolled students. They will have crucial years of their education disrupted by the loud machinery and construction. This would lead to many more students failing their exams and TCEs, further increasing Tasmania's unemployment rate, as these students will not have the certification that is wanted on resumes. The excess noise, vibrations and pollution from the increased traffic and heavy machinery will be a health and safety hazard to the pedestrians and students. Not to mention the excess carbon monoxide emissions and pollution produced will do nothing to benefit the impending climate change crisis we're in, one that we only have 12 years to fix before it becomes irreversible. If this hotel does not use sustainable energy, it will just be increasing the pollution in our atmosphere. If you really care about the future of the Tasmanian youth, as well as the future of our only inhabitable planet, you'd be indicating otherwise by voting in favour of this project. You'd prove that the members of the Launceston City Council have little regard over the future of the earth and the young people who will inherit it when climate change is most prevalent.
Thank you. Darren Singline.
Hello, my name's Darren Singline from Unum, Launceston. Firstly, thank you to our Mayor for allowing us to bring to everyone's attention the petition regarding the Gorge Hotel development, which I'm clearly against, which this is yet to be submitted to our intended recipient, the Resource Management and Planning Tribunal. In its infancy of 3 days, due to notification shortfalls, this petition has accrued over 380 concerned citizens' signatures, many of which still have unanswered questions not outlined in the Gorge Hotel development and planning. It raises concerns that developers and planners have concluded that this proposed building height will not distract visually, and that somehow it complies with section 15.4.1 of regulation regarding performance criteria P1, where interpretation of past tribunal findings on building height consistencies was seemingly dismissed. Additional unanswered petition concerns expressed are geological disturbances, increased traffic congestion and more confusing street signage, local residents' wellbeing, students' increased safety risks, local infrastructure damage during construction, sewer system stress, effluent increase, power consumption, cultural landscape impact, building size and style suitability, location appropriateness, and impact on existing historical cityscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex Brummel. Alex? Brownlee. That's right. Sorry, I couldn't read. I was wondering.
Alex Brownlee, GHD, President of Hobart, but I think...
Yeah, I'll allow that as well.
I was involved in preparing the planning report, and obviously the height of the building was a key issue under the planning scheme. As has been mentioned, there are 5 key criteria that need to be assessed. And in assisting me in making that assessment, we went through a process of looking at the wider cityscape. So there was a visual impact assessment prepared, a streetscape assessment that was prepared by a qualified landscape architect and urban design professional. We used the images, montages, renders of what the building would look like within that wider context in the streetscape. And Council indeed had access to the digital model that I believe was put into your model, and you've had the benefit of looking at how the building sits within that landscape. And those tools assisted me in addressing the criteria that have been mentioned in terms of the height. And the planning scheme does provide a discretion. So while there's a height limit as the acceptable solution, there's clearly a pathway for the discretion to be exercised, and the report goes into some length to address those concerns. In addition, there's the solar access issue, and the solar overshadowing diagrams and additional diagrams have been prepared that shows that there will be an impact on the Golden Brumby, but there's also an impact if we were to build 12 metres on the boundary adjacent to that property. So the impact is actually quite minor. But ultimately the test comes down to, it's a balance. You look at the planning scheme, you look at the use provisions, the development standards, and for much of the development it tracks along the permitted categories. There are a number of performance criteria that are triggered. We've made sure that we've got experts involved, whether it's looking at acoustics, traffic, the planning, the visual impacts, contaminated land, structural matters that have been mentioned are all signed off in the report. So,
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, your time is up. Chloe Lynn.
Chloe Line. I live at Campbelltown, but I assume I'm okay to speak.
Yeah.
I was another one of the planners involved in this project and putting the application together, which was very much a collaborative approach between a vast array of consultants and experts. From a planning perspective, I think the key issue is that of height, and again I reiterate that the planning scheme does not place a limitation on height, rather there are a number of matters to address if you want to go above 12 metres. They include compatibility with the landscape, topography, overshadowing, the bulk and form of building and the apparent height. Our submission provides a clear demonstration that the performance criteria is met, and we've provided a range of supporting studies to demonstrate that. The location of the site is actually uniquely placed within the city to absorb a tall building. The key attributes of the site are its low elevation, disparate surrounding streetscape, and lack of heritage character of the immediate surrounds. The council planner's assessment is unequivocal in determining that the proposal clearly meets the relevant standards of the planning scheme. The issues raised in the representation have been carefully considered by both the proponent and council. When I read the representations, there wasn't really anything that jumped out to me as being a showstopper, as can often happen when you submit a DA. With due respect to the representatives, many of the issues raised simply do not have any relevance under the planning scheme, and as such are not required to be considered in the assessment. These include seismic risk, heritage impacts to wildlife, and impact of climate change. The key issue raised was that of height. Many of the representatives misunderstood the planning scheme, believing that 12 metres is the maximum height allowable. I submit that whilst the building is tall, its unique design with a tower recessed from the street frontage and angled across the site means that its impact on the surrounding area is limited. This is clearly demonstrated by the streetscape assessment, landscape assessment and very detailed shadow studies. In closing, I would like to urge the councillors to adopt the planner's recommendation for approval. The project clearly meets the objectives of the urban mixed.
Thank you. Your time is up as well. Thank you. Dean Cocker.
Dean Cocker for the developer, the JAC Group. I live at 9 Spencer Street, East Launceston. The Gorge Hotel is not just a $50 million private investment in northern Tasmania. It's also a huge vote of confidence by Joseph Cromie and the JAC Group in Launceston. This project would employ up to 200 construction workers over 2 years, and once it's completed, 200 ongoing jobs, both direct and indirect jobs through the multiplier effect. That means there will be several millions of dollars annually pumped into the economy of Launceston. And there will be several tens of thousands of tourists that will come, whether for tourists or conferences, because it's not just a hotel, it's a hotel and function conference centre. This is something that Launceston is sorely lacking, a 5-star hotel with significant conference facilities. It is something that tourism representatives have been saying for a long time Launceston needs. Now, the community, those that have concerns, have had an opportunity to have their say, and the experts have considered their representations, and the experts say that this project ticks all the boxes. That's not just our consultants, that's council's own planning experts that have looked at this proposal. Of course, there is a discretion for the height, but we believe that the requirements have been satisfied. So, in closing, I would just urge the council to think about the future of Launceston, the jobs that will be created, the tourism opportunities, and to embrace a new contemporary designed hotel, a 5-star hotel for Launceston. Thank you very much.
Yep. Joseph Cromie.
Joe's just asked, just in case he
has an issue with speaking, he needs us to be here.
Yeah, that's fine. We've still got the 2 minutes, just so you're aware.
John Cromie, living in Charles Hotel. I got my house in Launceston, and especially testimony and Launceston. I have here 70 years, almost 70 years, all my mind all the time with food, wine, tourism and employment here. I am proud of that vineyard. I am proud of the Cedar, restaurant, Panorama, and Charles Hotel, and much more. Now I will be thinking building that the George Hotel. I will be proud of them. You will be proud of that too. Thank you.
Thank you. Peter Dixon.
Mr Mayor, Alderman, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I've been an investor throughout Tasmania for the last 40 years, and the one thing I've noticed over the last 10 years is that we've come across a three-speed economy in this state. In Hobart and surrounds, things are booming, a lot of economic activity. In Launceston and surrounds, it's much, much quieter. When you get up the northwest coast, it's worse still. We need economic activity. It's not very often that the City of Launceston would be presented with the opportunity to approve such a significant and wonderful development right here close to the city centre, with views down the Tamar River and so close to the gorge. We need the jobs, and we need that the opportunities for employment for younger people in particular post-completion of that project. It's absolutely essential. Everybody must be aware that the employment of our youth is a significant problem here and across our country. We need to do something about that. Investors today have more opportunities than ever to put their money or invest their money right throughout this country and throughout the world. If we want that capital employed, we have to, here in our city, we have to be proactive and do something about having that money invested. Fortunately, Joseph Cromie still prefers to spend the vast majority of his money here in our city. Every development he does in a quality manner and always brings things through to fruition in accordance with his standards. So I would encourage everybody here to get behind this project. We really need it to happen, and it will be a wonderful development for our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Jazz Frost.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. My name's Jazz Frost, and I would like to express my concern about the location of this hotel, especially the aftermath of the noise, pollution and ground vibrations, and how this will affect neighbouring establishments and schools, such as the TAFE, Sacred Heart Primary School and Launceston College, schools where individuals obtain such needed qualifications for a growing and demanding society. Not to mention that the ground vibrations and pollution may even go as far as headspace, a place where youth go to feel safe in a safe and quiet environment. Will this hotel change the way that youth feel safe in this environment? And this doesn't just go for as far as headspace, but let's just think about the wellness staff at the surrounding schools. Tasmanians' youth will feel unsafe due to the construction of this site, especially the ground vibrations and the excess noise. And this will add to the mental health epidemic within Tasmania. And let's just mention the effect this construction will have on hearing sensory students and students who suffer from auditory sensory overload. This will be detrimental to their health. This hotel will affect the health of so many important and vulnerable youth who deserve to feel like authority figures like yourselves deserve to feel like authority figures like yourself actually care and listen about them. Thank you.
Thank you. Brianna Coulson. Zona. Zolma. Thank you.
Hi, I would like to speak against the move. I'm from Mowbray. I'm Brianna Coulson-Zolma. My main concern I have around the hotel being built in the area that it's being built is that the suggested area is an impact on the surrounding traffic. I'd also like to mention that I'm sure everyone here has felt the slow burn that is the Inveresk and Invermay traffic problems that we currently have due to many buildings around there, and while they're being great, a lot of them are really awesome. I don't have a visual word for that. The traffic is one of the main issues that I have as a student, as a pedestrian. I have had several occasions where cars, they weren't paying attention and they've hit me, and it's been pretty traumatic to walk around that area, and I'd hate that to be the same sort of situation around LC. With the surrounding traffic to potentially get worse, there would be more risks of road rage, crashes and even fatalities. And I'm sure people remember in 2017 the 70-year-old man who was hit by the bus at the intersection. Some students from LC have also mentioned that could impact their ability to go to school, and especially students with anxiety might be more inclined to not attend anymore. Are we willing to risk this reality being one of your kids?
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have. So we go to the item. Moved by Councillor Finlay. Is there a seconder? Councillor McKenzie. Councillor Finlay, you wish to speak?
Thanks, Mayor. And firstly, I want to acknowledge the number of people that have attended the meeting, some that are previous regular attenders, but also acknowledge that young people of the community are participating in the process today. And I wanted to respond firstly to a couple of questions that were raised and to clarify those and speak to some of the comments prior to the item now. And firstly, to clarify the question, the very first question of the day around our opportunity for deferral. And the nature of the timing of consideration of planning authority matters, and that we work within the provisions of timing, and that the deemed approval date is imminent. And the two other matters that have repeatedly been raised around river health and traffic, the congestion, particularly with the outfall of sewer into the river and the congestion of the traffic in the immediate area. Given that both of those are existing matters and matters that are so significant that have been identified in the city deal for Launceston, we have almost, and I'm not sure whether everyone is aware, but there's almost $500 million being invested either through direct investment through Taswater or through cooperative elements through money with federal government, state government, local council, in terms of addressing the river health issues and the current capacity on our ability to manage sewer in high flow times. So an additional development at this time and other additional developments that will enter into this region will be captured within the work that's proposed and committed for that, both funding and plans committed for that. Similarly, with the traffic impact and congestion, we recognise that there are existing bottlenecks and concerns with traffic, and something that we need to manage going into the future, an existing concern that, again, through the city deal, we're currently working on the transport vision and working on short, medium and longer term issues to respond to that. So where they've been raised that this will add load, it's not just the responsibility of this single development application before us today to respond to that and solve that, and those things are in hand in a broader regional response capacity. For me today, there are three items that I want to specifically speak to. And the first is to acknowledge the impact of the immediate local area, and particularly the representative Susie and your husband and your children that are represented and immediately impacted. it's true that this is a significant development. It is large and it will have immediate and close impact on the amenity of the corner. There's been, through the report, significant documentation around, particular for me, the area that I wanted to interrogate was solar access. I think that was, and the report satisfies, although it demonstrates impact, satisfies for me that at the worst time in the year, being June, that the requirements of the scheme to deliver solar access are met, are reasonable. The other element of that localised impact is amenity, and in the zone being urban mixed use, the consideration of amenity on that impact, again, I feel that the report addresses, demonstrates impact, but addresses reasonableness in that matter. There are other and a number of specific and technical concerns that have been raised, but also through numerous reports have been addressed, which leads me to the third item that I wanted to discuss today was the bulk. So the height, the size, the scale of the development. And I had noted a couple of examples of existing buildings in the localised area that I wanted to raise, but one was raised in the statements earlier that I think is of interest. We, before a development application consideration, go on a bus trip and we go to the site and we ask questions and we respond and we talk about our concerns or support of a development. And language was used this morning, which is really interesting, is that we were asking about a different site and it was like, oh, but we're used to that. And someone just raised earlier another development of the proponent at the Charles Hotel and said, you know, that sits really nicely into the landscape, but where this is really large and intrusive. But in fact, actually, having spent hours or an hour and a half interrogating the 3D model and my own experience of moving around the city, as beautiful a development as it is, the Charles Hotel is in fact one of the most identifiable landmarks around Launceston, given that it's on a hillside, whether you're approaching the city down the southern outlet, whether you're in town on Charles Street looking up. It's significant because of its placement, not dissimilar to the QV building on High Street. So where a building is placed actually leads to the way that we engage with it and its impact. And
so excuse me, Councillor Finlay, your time's up. Do you want an extension?
Already?
Yeah. Moved Councillor Sauer, seconded Councillor Stosenchek. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.
And so has already been noted and was noted in the initial and subsequent reports that are yet to be incorporated into a scheme amendment, but through the Davies report, that in fact this area is perhaps the most beneficial area to hold a development like this because it's one of the lowest lying pieces of land in Launceston. It's interesting when we consider the heritage, streetscape and nature of the particular tight central area of Launceston and some of the residential suburbs of Launceston. And as many will know, over many years I'm a passionate and strong advocate of our heritage character. And with that, I'm still able to support this development before us today because I feel that one of the reasons why we're so lucky with the heritage fabric that we have in Launceston is that it's a full catalogue and that there are great streets, Cameron Street being one, St John Street being another, where you can walk from one to another and you actually are exposed and respond to a whole range of architectural eras, styles and also uses. So you can actually take a walk down St John Street and see residential, commercial, retail, industrial and of you know, various scales. So for me, supporting this development won't actually reduce the great personality and character of our the things that makes us unique in Launceston. I feel comfortable about that. I feel like in reading the reports and being comfortable with the reasonableness of the discretions, that we are a city that's been brave and bold. We're a city that we're proud of and often state our firsts, and that we're not a city that in the past has been risk averse. And I feel that the reasonableness of the assessment of this is warranted of approval. I think the development responds to the requirements of impact by the setbacks, by actually the podium and by the orientation of the tower on the site. and those three things together actually reduce the overall impact of the scale of the development. I was fortunate we've all had the opportunity, as been referenced, of the 3D model, and I can remember 18 years ago attempting to assess various developments and not having access to such technology, but sitting down and plotting out tens, if not, well, probably wasn't 100, but tens of plot points around the city, all around the ring of hills that embraces the city, which Paul Davies recognises is that element of the landscape which, either pierced or unpierced, is when a building has an impact. And there are very few points where experience of this development will actually pierce the horizon, and the most significant actually being that on Margaret Street. So the approach down Margaret Street is probably where the full face of the development will be experienced. The people
Thank you. Your time is up. So.
Again, okay. So in consideration of the heritage nature of the city and the scale of the development and all of the planning matters, I think it warrants approval.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. It's always a joy to follow Councillor Finlay. She lays it out so well. I think there's only one thing certain about this decision today, is that someone or some people are going to go unhappy with the result. We 12 and 11 of us here today have been elected by the ratepayers of Launceston to make decisions on their behalf. With that comes responsibility of making tough decisions. We're also residents of Launceston as well, and are ratepayers, so as a consequence of that we're impacted by the decisions that are made, not just like the other people in this room. Our role, as I see it, is to review the information provided to us by officers, make due inquiry as to its veracity, listen to both those for and against issues, and then make a decision based on the facts of the case. In this situation, we are sitting as a planning authority, and as such we are guided by the Act, that being the Launceston Interim Planning Act 2015, and we also have skilled advisors, being our planners, who provide us with input, who unpack the DAs and present to council and give us advice in relation to the decisions that we make. And I think they've tried hard, worked hard and diligently on this DA, and I thank them for the work that they've done in putting the reports to us. None of us around this table, to my knowledge, are qualified planners, so we need to take advice or listen to advice given. If we don't listen to advice given, that would be foolish on our behalf. But given there are discretions, we need to satisfy ourselves that they are reasonable in the context of the city, the site, the impact on neighbours and the surrounding environment. There's no doubt this is a big building in relation to the scale of buildings in Launceston. The height in total build is comparable to the Myer building, the Telstra Tower, the silos and probably the QV Tower in High Street. They are all in different locations and represent the city in different ways. I think it is also true that people will see what they want to see. Some will see it as a big, ugly and out of place, which others will see it as a well-designed building erected on the block to minimise the scale and improve what is essentially a most unaesthetically pleasing site in Launceston. It is interesting when I read those that object to the appropriateness of the building as being a blight on the terrible writing I've got here, on the entrance to the gorge, where there is no mention of the massive bridges, structures that go across in front of the aperture to the gorge. And when I say bridge, I actually mean bridges. I talk about King's Bridge, which most of us would see as an absolute asset to the city, and I do as well. But at one stage, it was a bridge, was man-made and put in front of that wonderful gorge structure. We now live with it. The flyover to West Launceston, to Riverside, is not, in my consideration, a great pretty building, but it actually sits across the aperture to the gorge. And there's one other big thing. There was a big hole dug in the side of the gorge many years ago, which served as a working quarry till the 70s or 80s, before Roger Smith came along and developed another development on it. So what I'm really trying to say in context, these things were probably massive at the time, but we don't even talk about them now. We live with them. And I suspect that at some stage into the future we may even see that the Gorge Hotel represents something like the King's Bridge to people as they drive past going forward. They may not, and I appreciate that people will have different views in regards to that. I make these comments not to be a lessen strongly held view, to lessen the strongly held views of many here today, but just to make a note that it does seem that sometimes these things do change over time. The hardest thing that I've got to do is the actual integration of the development with the neighbours, and I sat with Susie and her family a few days ago to talk about that, and they are significantly impacted by the development that's going on the corner. And again, a number of the issues that were raised, some of them were planning, some of them were not, in relation to, I guess, solar activity in and around the property is probably the major thing. But there's also some issues associated with things that have gone on in a previous development. So I guess that in my comment in finalising today, I can talk about all the various aspects of the development. I think they've been dealt with in great depth within the reports, and I actually endorse the comments and also the responses made by the officers in relation to that. But I guess my ask of the developers are just listen and be a good neighbour. Talk to the people who are surrounding the development, because they're the people who are impacted the most by what you're about to do. We think it'll be a great development for Launceston. I think it'll be a great development for Launceston and enhance the precinct. But there are people who will be adversely impacted by the decisions that are made here today if we go forward with the development. So I just ask that you go and be a good neighbour, talk to them. If they need tree trimmed in relation to it, have a good discussion about what that means to them and their amenity in relation to building and living in a site nearby you. I won't say anything further at this point in time, but I look forward to listening to others before I make my decision.
Thank you. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to the people who've taken the time to come in here today, but also to send me many emails. We're certainly, by far, it's the busiest or most talked about development application we've had in my 6 months here on the council. Part of my role outside the council is talking to people, and by and large, the great majority of people I talk to are either supportive of this development or in fact ambivalent to it. And what we always get is those people who come who have something to raise as an issue against it. And so I do caution people to not just look at the 20 who spoke against it today and 4 against it. I don't believe that's actually the community's feeling. I think the community generally accepts that what Joe Cromie and the JAC group have developed here in Launceston is in fact a quality developments, and in fact Joe's heart is here in Launceston. And I think of the 200 jobs that will be created by this was certainly mentioned by a number of people to me, as well as the 200 jobs ongoing in the actual hotel. Talking to Chris Griffin today from Tourism Northern Tasmania, he tells us we need 5-star accommodation in Launceston because we don't have any at the moment. And this will develop, and this development will deliver that. And that will bring a different type of tourist. A tourist will spend a lot of money in general terms compared to the average budget tourist that perhaps we've always targeted in the past. In 2012, I had the good fortune to spend a couple of hours one-on-one with Jan Geld, the world-famous architect, talking about streetscapes when in Copenhagen on a Rotary trip. The thing that he impressed upon me and my group of fellow Rotarians that was with him was the size of the building is unimportant. It is in fact its relationship at the street level. And it is that this does very well. By retaining the existing 2-storey TRC hotel along Patterson Street, and by putting a tower block to the rear of the building, you will not feel overshadowed as you do when you walk past the Telstra building opposite us, or indeed some of the other taller buildings in Launceston. And we see that with some of the other developments that have been important setback from the streetscape. So it is something that I think Joe and his team of architects are to be congratulated on in the way that they have designed it. I believe it is a good design. I do feel for the people who live in the Golden Brumby, it is unfortunate that you've chosen to live in a mixed urban business area. As such, the development is allowed. I wouldn't like it, and I don't blame you for not liking it. It is an unfortunate thing that you will have some of your solar aspect taken away. The fortunate part is you only have to walk a block and you'll be in the Royal Park, or a couple of blocks and you'll be in the Brickfields, which in my place in Norwood I don't have those same aspects. So you have the amenity of the city, which is what you've got. I believe this will become, as others have said, a natural landmark within this city. It will be able to be seen, it is a big building, and it will be able to be seen from certain parts of the city, but will enable tourists to find their way to the gorge. You'll be able to simply point it out and say, yep, walk down Patterson Street. But you know, the interesting thing is, as you walk down Patterson Street, you probably won't actually see it till you almost get to Margaret Street. When you look at the development thing, it looks biggest from Margaret Street. There's no doubt about that. But as I came over the top of Henry Street this morning, up at Ravenswood, the most common building I saw was in fact the QV Hospital. I saw the Telstra building, and I looked very hard for where this hotel would be, and I doubt I would see it from there. So whilst other people will see it, there'll be many who won't. Finally, I think this is a very important link in creating what should be Launceston's tourist precinct around the edge of the Tamar. I think that what we've seen developed in Patterson Street should become Launceston's answer to Salamanca in Hobart and become a real tourist precinct. As such, there will need to be hotels and such things in that precinct. So I stand and say, well done, Joe, and I look forward to supporting the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Thanks, Mayor, and I support the words and points highlighted by Councillor Finlay, Councillor Mackenzie and Councillor Harris, and won't be repeating what they said, but will be adding other bits to it. The only bit I would repeat would be I would acknowledge and thank everyone who took the time to come in and speak today, who took the time to email us or call us. And it does take time and effort for people to put their submissions together, so I do thank them for that, and particularly the diverse range of views, which I think is a very positive thing, where people that might have a concern had different concerns, and people that supported it for different reasons. So I think that's a great thing. Councillor Harris talked about that this has probably been the most interesting one for him in 6 months. It's probably been the most interesting one in 9 years for me, and interesting in lots of ways, in that there were a number of points raised in the representations and in the speakers today that it's easy to say that you feel for people, it's easy to say that you understand when you're not in their shoes, but I do hear those concerns and I do share some of those concerns and fears that people have. And I think it was touched on in earlier speakers that when something is new, people can be fearful. I've spoken around this table before, doing some research for another item, where I came across some articles when the Sydney Opera House was built, way back when it was built, and people decried what a horrific development it was terrible, and it was ugly, and it was all these things, and now it's regarded as a really iconic development in the area that it is. So I'm just saying that, and I think too, about the people that have sat around this table over the last 100 or around the council table over the last 100 or so years, when new buildings came to the city, what must have been said? What must have been said when the new buildings came, and it was something extremely different. So, again, we're all entitled to an opinion. The key thing for me, Mr Mayor, in looking at this today, in the very publicly available documents online and our papers that we're speaking to today, when this has been assessed, there are words through it where it says, it highlights something and it says it's consistent, it's assessed as consistent. When we sit as a planning authority, we are bound to follow where things apply, and it expresses very clearly in our documents things are consistent. Where they rely on performance criteria, it explores those, and then it measures them and says yes, it complies through the whole document, through every part of it. And it was mentioned by Mr Brownlee, I think it was, and Miss Lyon, that the significant work that went in from there, the significant work our people have put into it. If we're sitting as a planning authority, we're looking at what it looks like. And for the benefit of those who don't come every fortnight to our meetings, or perhaps don't always look online, there are many planning applications that come to this council where things don't comply, where they don't meet performance criteria, where the officers refuse them, where we refuse them. So in this case, when we're sitting as a planning authority, I'm seeing where things comply or where they're consistent and where they meet the performance criteria. I'm going to touch on some of the points raised by the speakers, because I think that's really important, and some of those are also included in our papers with the various representations that have been made to the council and also at the recent session that was held where people had a chance to express their views. For me, there are a number of things which, again, don't form part of that planning process, and perhaps sometimes, with complete respect to everyone, it's where there's a bit of confusion. I've seen a lot of stuff come to me in correspondence and in the media and in social media where people have said, oh, you know, we shouldn't support it because we don't like the look of it. Well, you know, with all respect, that's not a planning consideration, and it's one of the reasons why we all live in houses that look different. You know, what I think's nice, someone mightn't think's nice. What someone, you know, and that's okay. But what I'm saying is that's not a grounds for us to refuse something here today. The other thing that seems to be overlooked, which I have conveyed back to some people that have verbally spoken to me, this isn't a new thing. This development has been being planned and prepared, and the work's gone into it with the JAC group for a significant period of time. They ran a design competition that was publicised in the media, on social media. In fact, at the time, Mr Mayor, had some great kudos because people said, what a great idea that you're not just coming into the council and submitting something, you're going out and you're getting designers to do things. And I think that's important. This isn't a new thing that's just come to us very recently.
Thank you, Councillor Soward. Your time's up. Do you like an extension?
Thank you.
Thank you. Moved Councillor McKenzie, seconded Councillor Cox. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.
As you read through the issues that have been raised by the representatives and the responses from the officers, some of the things, as it says, there's been a traffic assessment. It talks about the Tas Water assessment. So other people, not just the officers of this council or the JAC planners, lots of other people have had their eyes on this. They've had a look at it and they've said, yeah, it complies. So that's really important. I'm just going to finish up my remarks with something that's been touched on by Mr Gross. People have said to me in their correspondence, Mr Mayor, they've said, Launceston doesn't need another hotel. That's been said to me by people that live in Launceston who, by and large, probably don't stay in hotels in Launceston because they live here. If you ever talk to visitors that want to come to this city, as I do and many of us do, try and get a room here when Festivale's on. Try and get a room here when Mona Foma's on. Try and get a room here when the footy's on. Try and get a room here when Agfest is on. The supercars, the football, the cup. Right? Why would someone want to spend $50 million to build something that no one wants to stay in? The reason it's being built is there's a demand for it. And as was said by Mr Cocker, the conference facilities, again, are something that this city has been crying out for. I had people talking to me about it 9 years ago, decrying the fact we didn't have a large conference facility. They wanted to bring conferences to our city. The flow-on effect that comes from this development is huge. And again, I think it's understated by people. It's not just the people staying in the hotel. Those people in the middle of this city who write to us, who write to the paper, tell us the world's coming to an end because we're not bringing people into the city, what do you reckon is going to happen? Tourists, visitors, people eating in our eateries, shopping in our shops, travelling around our beautiful Tamar Valley. You know, the economic benefit is huge, and I think it'll be even further enhanced than what's been suggested. So I'll be interested in other remarks. I do thank everyone for their contributions, and I think the potential of this development for the city and what it brings will be huge.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. I might just start by countering a remark that Councillor Soward made at the end there about the need for a development such as this in Launceston. But I would suggest to everyone at this table that it's a non sequitur that just because we might need a hotel or we might need a conference centre is no reason to approve this particular hotel in this particular location. The two just don't go together at all. We can all accept that the demand is increasing for hotel beds in Launceston without approving this particular development in this particular location. I'd like to start by acknowledging Mr Dean Cocker and Joseph Cromie for showing faith in Launceston's future. I'd like to also acknowledge the people who've made representations today, either by writing or by being here in person, against the proposal. It's the faith that the developers show in Launceston is a faith that we all share on both sides of this discussion. And it's a faith in our future as well. And it's a future that is only possible because of the unique place that we live in. Tourists come here, people move here, people talk about us, people tell their friends, they tell their family what a beautiful place it is, because they recognise what is already special. And when you seek to take advantage of that too much by building things out of character or in inappropriate places, you demonstrate an inability to see that that future that you're celebrating and that you're wanting to embrace is directly threatened by an ill-conceived development. As I say, I commend the people taking part in this democratic process. Many have summarised the reasons for rejecting this development application far better than I can, partially because they're going to be personally affected by it. And I commend you all for standing up for our city's future. And whether you understand the nuances of our planning scheme or you have an emotive response to this development, your voice is heard, and it's heard by me. A development of this height and size and location should have sought community input from the beginning of the proposal. I know that there was a competition internally held by the company to seek out a design, but of course that was within the company's own parameters. It's a massive development for our city, and make no mistake that any attempts to reduce its impacts, visual or otherwise, in the application are disingenuous insofar as the people who are affected know that this is a massive development in that area for Launceston. So I apologise in advance to all those people who've made representations against this project as it stands. And why do I apologise? Because I believe this project will gain approval today from my fellow councillors. I apologise because your concerns will not be heard today. The community will not be listened to today. I challenge my fellow councillors to make a fool of me for making this assertion, to prove me wrong. I challenge my fellow councillors to state what they believe, to make a stand for something, for either they believe in the unfettered development of our city, or they believe that the current controls we have in our planning scheme mean something. This building sets dangerous new precedents, and it makes a mockery of our current planning scheme, and also brings into question the future building heights report that we're yet to adopt. Community members have a right to believe that our planning scheme means something. If this building is approved, it renders all of that work into question. And if it is approved, of course the blame doesn't lie with the developer. His job, or her job, is to come along and maximise the return on their investment, to make the most of every opportunity, and no one begrudges that in our society. If it's approved, the fault will lie with this council for not heeding their own planning scheme, not listening to the voice of their own people, and not knowing what it is they actually stand for. But there is actually a solution. Ironically, if this was to be built to the 5th floor, according to the plans, it would equal the 24-metre height for this zone that was recommended by Paul Davies in his report. But make no mistake, of course, this development is not purely for community benefit. It's for the proponent and his benefit. Otherwise, there would have been consultancy with the community from the beginning.
I thank you, Councillor Walker. Your time's up. Do you need an extension?
I would like, please.
Moved Councillor Soward, seconded Councillor Dawkins. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.
I thought you weren't going to give it to me for a sec. This site can be profitable. It can be a profitable venture if it's half the height. The proponent owns another accommodation place adjacent to it that is, of course, nowhere near the proposed height of this building. It can succeed at meeting community expectations, site appropriateness and profitability, and contribute to our town's future economic growth. I say this is the wrong design in the wrong location. It does not make an attempt to fit in with surrounding developments, and indeed the developer removed some of those existing developments in preparation for this site. And it exceeds the current planning provisions, as everyone knows. And in that way, it thumbs its nose at proposed building heights, existing building heights, and in turn paves the way for future inappropriate developments. It clearly fails to meet the objective criteria in section 15.4.1 of the planning scheme, as it is too tall, and so it must be judged on the performance criteria. I can't see how it's compatible with the streetscape and the surrounding area, including the natural area of the gorge, which was so eloquently pointed out by one of the representatives as it was contained in the reimagining the gorge process. So, in conclusion, I won't be supporting this development today. I would love to see the developer go back to the drawing board and design an exciting and appropriate development for this site that engages the population of Launceston and excites the population and can be embraced by everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Much of what I was going to contribute to the debate has been said by Councillor Finlay and Councillor Mackenzie. But I do think it's important to rise to, as has been suggested, put forward what it is that I believe in and what it is that I stand for. Mr Mayor, I stand for good governance, and I stand for the opportunity to listen, to represent and to be educated by the people of our community. Whether or not they are ratepayers or residents is irrelevant to me, as is the figure of any development application or investment project that comes before me. And I would question some of the comments that have been contributed around the table, and I would hope that the level of integrity and the way that all development applications are assessed and considered would be the same, irrespective of who the applicant was and irrespective of what the financial investment was. Because for everyone, the issues are the same. It's their property, it's their neighbour, it's their livelihood, or it's their concern that is considered. And so for me, I thank all of those people, the 38 who took the time to write and in some instances rewrite their representation to Council, the many others that have emailed subsequently, and of course those that are in the gallery today who have spoken for and against the item. For me, wearing a dual hat of a member of a planning authority and a member of this council is sometimes difficult. And in today's example, it is most difficult. Many members of the council have contributed about how this is good for tourism, it's good for the economy, it's great for jobs. In my assessment, and as a member of this planning authority, those things are irrelevant. And it disturbs me sometimes that people confuse the roles that we have here. I have interrogated over the last few days, over the weekend, all of the detail, all of the data that has been provided to me, together with all of the conversations that I've had through both formal and informal means. And there have been many. And living, working and loving in our community means that there will be many more once this decision is taken today. I have taken it and looked into my heart with regard to the considerations and the concerns and, importantly, the impacts of the neighbours. And much has been said of Susie, but there are neighbours on the other side as well who have very legitimate concerns and have history and examples to prove that things haven't necessarily gone as well as they should have in previous examples. And I echo the words of Councillor Mackenzie and trust that the developer who wants to make Launceston proud and wants to make himself and us proud makes the neighbours just as proud and works with them during this construction process if this application is approved today, through not only the Golden Brumby but also the apartments in the body corporate, where there are 15 apartments. It is a difficult role to wear both hats as part of this council, but if one follows the standards that are provided and looks to the scheme, in my undertaking, in my rigorous undertaking of this application, I'll be supporting it today.
Thank you. Councillor Dawkins.
Thank you, Mayor. This matter is too important not to rise and give voice to today. I don't want to go over old ground, but I do want to thank the community members who have got in touch with me and who have been here today. I know how difficult it is to stand up in a room like this and speak from your heart. I'd also like to thank the proponents for the work that they've done in Launceston over the years and for the work that they continue to do. Like many, I have really agonised over this decision. I find myself in an incredibly difficult place because for many years now I have been decrying the ravages of logging and the effects it has on our wider community, our environment. And to replace that, we have to have some sort of economic activity. And we have been saying over and over again, it's tourism. Tourism is going to replace resource extraction in northern Tasmania. And here we are. It's happening. How can we, on one hand, support tourism and not support this development, which I believe is done with the very best of intentions for the future of this community? I don't say these words lightly. I say them with the truest of intent, that I will stand here and I will listen to the words of our planning officers, to experts in their fields, because I am not a planning expert. I am not an engineer. I'm a small business person with a small amount of experience in politics. And this is a very, very important to me, that it is known that when it's the most difficult conversation, the most difficult decision, I will listen to the words of experts, because I think that is the smartest thing and the best thing I can do for our community. I will be supporting this DA today.
Thank you. Councillor Dakin.
Thank you, Mayor. Like my other fellow councillors, I've had to scribble all my notes off because they've all been spoken about, but thank you very much for that, to make my speech short. This is one of the reasons why I stood to be a councillor, is this very day, to be part of making decisions for our future that are going to shape the city and the community for many years to come. When referring to town planning matters, we can only assess the application, and it's very hard to take the emotion out of that. We are not talking about the gorge. We're talking about 123 Patterson Street. That's what we're talking about. I also would like to thank everyone that has represented and spoken and sent emails in, which is very, very helpful. We all want to protect our heritage, our unique buildings. This is the story of Launceston. Our story evolves and is forever changing and continues to change. In 100 years' time, will this building be viewed as an iconic building? We're not going to know. We're not going to be here. I don't think, when I was younger. Or are we simply just overcompensating for buildings built in the past that some in the community don't like and some do? And I'm going to talk about Myer, Telstra, QV Hospital. And who would think that possibly one of the ugliest buildings in the town has now just been listed with Henty House? Again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future. Some may like it. No. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial, and it's actually my belief, is I ask, why is height such an issue? Why is height such an issue? I don't see it as an issue at all. In fact, I'd like to see taller buildings in the city. That's just my opinion. It's also the opinion of many others that share the same. But what the developers, JAC Group, have proposed shows restraint, shows great design and very good balance with the city and the community. It suits the zoning very well and sits extremely well with the current taller buildings within Launceston. The Gorge Hotel we're talking about is 39 metres. If we run through the lot, Silos 39.8, taller. Telstra 39, plus the antennas, taller. Myer 38, plus the antennas, taller. So based on the comparable buildings, I believe there is no argument in regards to the height of this building. Furthermore, this building will have far less impact on the cityscape. If we really wanted an iconic building, this one would have to be 52 to 60 metres. It can be within the current planning scheme. And that's something I may or may not support if we want to put an icon within the city. But due to the topography of the land, the Gorge Hotel will actually sit lower than any of our other buildings in the city. I think we have to remind ourselves of that. The most visual impact, and I, like Councillor Finlay, spent not quite an hour going through the 3D model, looking at all the different aspects, it is from Margaret Street, is how it is the most visual impact. And you look at Margaret Street, and we've got car yards, we've got Launceston College, we've got mechanics. We're not in a residential area at all. So I believe this is a fantastic position for the hotel. I can't think of a better use for the space, and it will add real value to the city. Change. Some people embrace it, others are concerned with change and find it difficult. Look at every city over the last 100 years. They've changed, they've evolved. Without change, they're probably not there. They haven't grown. They're not a strong economy for the future of the community and their children. Our change at the moment is being driven by tourism and hospitality. So, where and why are we doing the Gorge Hotel? Because, as I think Councillor Soward said, there's a market, there's a demand, and how grateful we should be that we've got great developers, not just the JSC group, that are investing in the future of Launceston. You only need to look currently at what's going on. When was the last time, potentially, we've had 3 new hotels built, 4.5 to 5 star, within 2-3 years? I can't think of a time. I mean, I'm not here that long. And the quality is the same. I mean, nearly $200 million of private investment in the local economy. This private investment coincides with the public investment through the city deal, the city heart. Right now, Launceston's in a great place. We have major investment in our city, exciting projects like Riverbend, UTAS relocation. We have world-class facilities. We've got Aquatic Centre, the football stadium, QV Mag, all to name a few, that surround our cultural heritage, which makes Launceston unique. Now, potentially, we're going to have a 5-star hotel to sit beside it. I think I've just gone over things, but as I said, it's exciting times ahead and great opportunities to attract investment to stimulate our economy, which the Gorge Hotel is one of those. I support our professional staff with their balanced assessment and recommendation for this development application.
Thank you. Question from Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Just previous speaker mentioned the heights of Myer and the Telstra building just across the road. Can council officers just explain the actual height of those buildings compared to the relative height from sea level? I mean, I know that the silos are a comparable height to the proposal on the table today, but my understanding is that the Myer building is, you know, a third less in height from the ground.
Thank you. Richard.
Just before we find the exact heights which are in the report, and Ian's just finding them, I presume what you're meaning is the AHD heights of the tops of each of the buildings. Is that right?
And just to clarify, I'm talking about the height of the building from the ground to the top of the building in its location.
Irrespective of the level of the ground underneath the buildings.
Yeah, otherwise I could ask the AHD height of a house in West Launceston,
yes,
perhaps,
so
which might be 200 metres.
Thank you. The heights from the pavement
yep,
to the top of the building.
Thank you.
We've got those. The silos at 39.8, the Telstra Exchange building 39, and Myer building 38.
Councillor Stosenczak.
Thank you. Today's decision has been the most difficult one for me since I've been on council. I've read all of the documentation, including all objections, spoken to members of the community and spoken in depth to council officers. exploring the 3D modelling system, which allows us to view the development from any vantage point throughout the city. I've also had many sleepless nights debating many conflicting issues in my own mind. To be honest, I'm not completely comfortable voting either way. However, that's what I'm here for, and when weighing up all the factors, I've decided to vote for this proposal. Obviously, I have some concerns about the height, but overall, I believe it will be a good development for Launceston. I won't go into any more individual issues because I think they've all been covered in depth today. I acknowledge the concerns of the representatives and the members of the community who have reservations with the development. When we sit as a planning authority, we have less flexibility than when we sit as a council. I believe the JAC group has submitted a quality proposal which satisfies the planning scheme, and I'm comfortable with the discretions in the performance criteria, so I'll be supporting the development today.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I'm like you, I hate days like this. You've got to make a decision, and I can see both sides of this. Having said that, I think this is going to be a great benefit to this city. I understand and I accept the concerns of the people that have come, that have spoken today. To Susie, I certainly understand your concerns. It doesn't make anything better for you, but I do understand. Over the years, I think Councillor Dakin said, if you don't have prosperity, you don't have a future, or something along those lines anyway. Many years ago, the world was going to end in the city because somebody built a building called Myer, and it was horrendous. It was ugly, it was big, it was awful. It's still there, going all right. Wasn't that long ago that a fellow had a good idea and he decided he'd build something, and the people went crazy. They hated it. It was a terrible, terrible thing. The man's name was Roger Smith, and it was called the Penny Royal. Worked out all right, thanks Joe. Came up okay. So over the years there's been change, there's been lots of change. This is another chapter in that change. You won't all like it, and I understand why some of you don't like it. Some of the reasons I don't get, some of the reasons I do get. Joe, I've known you a long time. The only request I would make to you is look after your neighbours. They have got genuine concerns. Some of them are going to do a little bit hard over some things. And Dean, I know that you'll do that. Because if you don't, I'm going to come and talk to you on their behalf. So it won't make it right, and it won't make it all go away. But at least let's try and get this together, and let's try and do this in a nice way. I wish you well with the project. As Councillor Dakin said, when did this city last have this sort of prosperity? These sort of activities all happening in one time. It's great. We begged for it. We asked for it for years. Never happened. Now we've got it. Let's embrace it, and let's see it through to the future. And hopefully the city will continue to progress.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, if you'd have the floor for a minute. Yeah, I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said because I know a lot has been said and some of the things I would have said, but I do want to say just a few things. And one in particular is very much, I do empathise with Susie and your family, having been there yesterday and have a look at the impact that's been in the past, that will happen, and hearing your story, it is very touching and very moving and very real to you. It's very real to you indeed, and it's something that I'm not sure what the answer is in this situation, except as Councillor Harris did point out, that it's the area is not a residential area, and that does make it difficult for us as sitting as a planning authority. So, but I do empathise with you and your concerns you have there. As far as some of the other issues raised, especially the storage, has been mentioned quite a number of times. I do want to mention that through the city deal, and Councillor Finlay has mentioned some of this, but I just want to stress that through the city deal, we have got the $94.6 million, which is going to convert a lot of water, a lot of sewage coming through the combined system, will go straight directly to the plant, wherever it's going to, the new plant that's going to be. We are going to divert some of that water away from where it's currently going and the sewage. It won't all flow into where it is now. Not only that, that's 94.6 million. We're going to have some holding bays. So when we get the heavy downpours, there'll be a retention bay where the water is going to be able to sit, and it won't go through that system as well. It'll be stopped. And on top of that, as Councillor Finlay has mentioned, Taswater is going to spend some 300+ million on upgrading their systems so that all the water that goes through, the sewage that's going to go through, will be treated, and will, before it gets in, even under heavy rainfall, it won't be going into our rivers, which is extremely important That is going to be happening, and the money is there. It's in both the federal and state budgets. The TasWater has got it in its commitments, and all of that should be rolling out in the next probably 2 to 3 years. So I just want to stress that because that's an issue for some people here as well. And other issues is the design of the building. Like everyone else around this table, I'm certainly not an engineer, and I'm not everybody, some are engineers, I'll take that back, but I'm not an engineer, and I'm one of those that either like something or I don't when I see something, and I can assure you the Myer building is the same height. I don't think it's that exciting. The Telstra building is the same height. I don't think it's that exciting. That's my opinion. Other people will differ with that. The building just across here, Henty House, is one that lower, but I still don't like it. I don't think it's a very good design. But that's, again, other people here, architects love it. They think it's fantastic. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder to some ways. It's what we have in our mind, it's what we like. This building is something that I think they've done a fantastic job, and I congratulate the Cromie Group on the way they did. I believe they have spoken to the public for quite a number of years. It's been out there. They've actually put it out for consulting. They've had all the pictures for the public, and public have given their comment. I've had plenty of people 2 years ago saying, or was it 18 months, whenever that was out there in the public, they were agreeing with one design, disagreeing with the other. So people know all about it. A lot of people know about it. They have to, because it's been out there for quite some time. But not only that, whether I like the one that was chosen or one that's a bit different, that's a personal decision, and it's something that I don't think is really enters into for me. I think it's a building that we can live with. Having a look at, as it's been said, with the 3D models and seeing the design and looking at it from different angles, it's amazing how it does stand out in certain locations, but others you wouldn't even know it's going to be there. And I would have thought after it's been there for 5 years, most people around wouldn't even see it, wouldn't even come. If you're coming down Patterson Street, it's not going to be standing out at all. Obviously, for those living close by, it is going to have an impact. No doubt about that, and I accept that, and it will be. But sitting as a planning authority through the process it's gone through, and for the jobs, there is going to be young people in this city who are going to get jobs on site during the construction. A number of them, quite a few of them. There'll be young people who'll get jobs later on, and my children, when they went through their college and when they studied, did their year 10, 11, they loved the jobs they got in the hospitality industry to give them extra cash. There'll be more of those around for our young people that are studying as well. So there are fors and against, but on my feeling where I'm sitting, I am going to support it because I believe it's going to add to our community. It's going to really mean a better place for some people to come and stay. And Launceston is lacking in an upper class, a 5-star hotel, and it's something I believe that we really need. So thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. I do, and it's fantastic to hear from everyone around the table around a development as significant to this. And in closing, I just wanted to reinforce that although there have been some comments either through representation or comments of support or around the table where in some people's opinion they haven't necessarily been as relevant, I think the zone purpose of this development is really important to be clear about. And where we talk about capacity around tourism and the quality of the accommodation offering, the zone purpose here for the urban mixed-use zone is to provide for integration of residential, retail, community services, commercial activities in the urban location, but it's also to encourage residential visitor accommodation and tourism operation uses as a means of increasing activity outside normal business hours. And there's no doubt where we have a cool season strategy, we're also looking to invigorate our nighttime economy. And so there is a lot of relevance about the need case, the use case for this development, as well as the importance of assessing it against the planning scheme. There's no doubt, and I haven't heard anyone around the table say that this is not a significant scaled building. There's no one hiding away from that and saying that it's not going to have an impact. This building is designed to have an impact. That impact will then become part of hearing the numbers around the table, I'm confident this will be supported, but this building will become a part of the catalogue of Launceston's architectural history, and it's a history that we've got a proud tradition. The call of what do we stand for? I stand for respectful engagement. I don't stand for being called out, but I stand for preserving and supporting the the integrity, the character, the nature of Launceston. And that's actually that we're a recent community built on innovation and enterprise. We're a community that we speak regularly about the pride of our innovation and our firsts. This is a development application that meets the requirements of the scheme. It is due and worthy of support, and it actually speaks to the character and the reputation, the traditions and the future of Launceston. I support it and commend it to Council.
Thank you. I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? It's carried. Thank you. We'll now have a 15-minute break, so to 3:15 by that clock.
Council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks.
Continue to sit as a planning authority. Now go to 8.2. Moved Councillor Soward, seconded. Oh, thank you very much. I apologise, we have some speakers. You're here for when the rules were read before, I take it? So, who's speaking? Yes, thank you. So Stuart Solomon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor and councillors. Stuart Solomon, 27 Vaux Street, West Launceston, against. The recommendation to grant a permit for this subdivision does not address the main issues in our letter. The land area is less than 1,500 square metres, and on 3 occasions we were assured by expert council planners that we were safe from further development in this low-density residential zoning. In 2014, prior to us deciding to purchase, on the 22nd of February and on the 8th of April, the very day before the application was lodged. This DA is consequently causing us a great deal of stress and anxiety. On no occasion was Council advice qualified by mentioning that properties under 1,500 square metres could be subdivided on a discretionary basis. Neither were we advised that there were precedents within 200 metres, which is now being used as justification. The entire reason we moved there was because we were confident of the peace and quiet we would enjoy there. Our house is situated further from the street than the neighbours, so we experience little noise and nobody is overlooked. The views from our kitchen and main living area are directly overlooking the proposed development site. We run a busy local business, we contribute to the local community through Harvest Market, and we enjoy our tranquility at home when we're not working. It takes time, energy, preparation and money if we have to move. What is the rush to densify in this low-density zoned area? We understand that once the statewide planning scheme comes into effect, zonings may change. If the area is rezoned at some stage, that would give residents time to make an informed decision if they wish to move. We urge councillors to inform themselves as to why Council is advising ratepayers that subdivision is not permitted for these blocks below 1,500 square metres, then allow applications to proceed this far. Please reject this application.
Thank you. And Will Gordon.
Will Gordon, 30 Ryan Street, East Launceston, for the application. Mr Mayor and Alderman, with due respect to the representors, most concerns are not applicable under the planning scheme. While this application does not involve tree removal, this may be captured under future development application for a new dwelling on Lot 2, and at such time this can be addressed with appropriate measures. The scheme states that further densification is encouraged within the Western Hillside precinct. Lot sizes under 1,500 square metres are discretionary for a purpose. The council planners have clearly determined that the proposed lots are in keeping with the surrounding area, and by recommending this for approval have stated that this application satisfies the required performance criteria. As such, I respectfully urge you to approve this application. Thank you.
Thank you. So moved Councillor Soward, seconded Councillor Mackenzie. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Soward?
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Very briefly, and with this matter, as we work our way through the documentation, Obviously, where you look through the report, the development complies. It highlights, areas where it relies on performance criteria, and once again, where it does that, it complies. So I do hear the representative, Mr. Solomon's concerns, and obviously, as a neighbour, it obviously has that impact on him. But I guess a theme from a previous item before us today, when we're sitting as a planning authority, we've got documentation in front of us that tells us that this application from Mr. Gordon complies with the planning scheme, and in that regard I'll be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mayor. Again, I acknowledge the comments made by the representor, and I obviously share concern if he thought the advice was given to him in relation to the 1,500 square metre block not being able to be subdivided. I think that in all cases, I think it's general advice and it's not specific advice until such time as a planning application is lodged anyway, or professional advice is sought on the matter. Again, clearly 1,500 square metre blocks are the norm in a low residential, but there are performance criteria that will enable you to subdivide at lower rates than that. The two blocks are now going to be roughly 600 and roughly 800 square metres. The scenic management overlay isn't impacted by any of the subdivision at this point in time, and quite frankly, the sewerage network is able to cope with it, I think, which has been said by Taswater. So as a consequence of that, there is no basis on which we can knock this subdivision back today.
Thank you. Any other councillors wish to speak? Question, Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Could I just get from Council Relevant Officer a more clarification around the 1,500 metres and the low density zoning details, please?
Thank you. Richard.
There was a little bit of complexity in the multiple dwellings.
Sorry.
There is some complexity in that multiple dwellings are prohibited in the zone, but subdivision is allowable. So you could you build a second dwelling behind the house as a multiple dwelling? No. Could you subdivide a block under performance criteria? Yes. Would that block then allow a single dwelling? Yes. So there is some complexity in that, and it does depend on what questions are asked and what the understanding of the person who's answering the question is giving that advice. But we don't believe we've given incorrect advice. It potentially could have been a different question, and there is some complexity to that.
Thank you. Any other speakers or questions? Councillor Soward, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. Those against? That's one against, the rest is for. The motion is carried. We now no longer sit as a planning authority. We go on to Mayor's announcements, and I will be brief to say that very privileged that I had to go to Melbourne at the long weekend and to travel with Fox Harmony, the choir, our City of Launceston choir, and they sang at a number of concerts and in an environment of a lot of singing. It was actually a festival for learning to sing and singing together, and obviously the choir loved that. But I want to say that they performed extremely well, very well indeed. Fantastic effort, and they did a pop-up. I've heard of pop-up shops. This is a pop-up choir where they sang in an area where people were sitting and that. And I had people not knowing who I was there, but just walking up saying, "Where are this choir from? They are fantastic. They did a great job." So the public enjoyed it. Everybody there enjoyed it, and they did a great job, and I think they're a real credit to the city, so congratulations to our council for supporting them, the City of Launceston Choir, Fox Harmony. Thank you. Councillor reports. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be quick also. Two items that I wanted to share today. I had the pleasure yesterday of popping in briefly to a subsequent visioning day for Relbia, which was undertaken by our Development Services Planning team. And the level of conversation and the contribution from those residents who were in attendance, some new, some very established in the suburb, was phenomenal. And I know that this was the third workshop that was offered after the success of the initial two, And it was just a wonderful way of seeing how our community could be involved in shaping the vision for their suburb and our city. So I wanted to congratulate Director Hurst and her team on that wonderful initiative. And I also wanted today to rise to celebrate the Helpman nomination of the Mona Foma Festival. In Australia, in culture and the arts, being nominated for a Helpman is as good and as big as it gets. And to have that festival nominated again this year, being its first year in Launceston, has been nominated previously, and you might have seen that Dark Mofo has already been announced as receiving a Helpman, but it is a testament to the vision and the hard work that the organisers, together with our council staff at the QV Mag, contributed to the success of that event, which of course we're looking forward to welcoming back for a second time in January 2020.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. And again, the Mayor was commenting I wasn't wearing my Launceston badge today, and the reason I'm actually wearing two badges. And I just wanted to reflect on the Red Cross. I was giving plasma earlier in the week, and I actually hit donation number 75 this week, which I'm pretty proud of. A lot more people have done more than that, but I just really want to make comment about the great work that the blood bank does and the need, particularly this time of year, for people to donate blood. I know this council and many of its employees actually go and donate at the Red Cross, but I just really wanted to put a call out for people who have thought about it, not got round to doing it or haven't done it for a while, to consider going down to the blood bank, because they certainly do need our blood.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to comment on two things over this past week. The Launceston Safer Communities Partnership had a meeting last week and responded to a call from Metro Tasmania and State Growth in regards to consultation on the changes to bus services. If people remember, a year or perhaps more ago, there was quite a lot of community engagement around the proposed change to the bus services across Tasmania, but particularly those in the Launceston area. And they took on board that feedback and are now doing a second phase of consultation around that. The members of the Launceston Safer Communities Partnership are really diverse and have got a whole range of different purposes in the community, but we've recognised for the year ahead that public transport actually has the potential to respond to and address a lot of safety but community wellbeing and health issues, and so it's a focus of ours. We submitted a response last week, and within the week, senior officers from Metro and State Growth travelled to Launceston to hear the committee, so we convened again yesterday. The reason why I rise to say that is, one, our messages were heard and they were delivered clearly from a lot of the stakeholder members, but all through our processes, our community, our health and My Place, My Future, who have all recognised public transport as an issue. And we think that we've come to a solution on some northern suburbs connectivity, things that we might be able to trial. So I wanted to rise to actually commend Metro and State Growth for listening, because often they are, particularly by us, provided with a lot of negative feedback about their inability to be flexible about the needs of the community. So that was the first thing. And the second, last night, it's been a program or a great initiative of ours for a long time, but Art Start, the primary school's art exhibition, was opened at the Queen Victoria Museum and Art Gallery at Royal Park. And it's a great initiative, and I'd encourage anyone to go down and have a look at the works. It's on the back of the Marjorie Bligh exhibition about quirky, imaginative, innovative creations from young people. And it was the first time this time that the curators of the exhibition were actually 5 young people from the 9 primary schools that were participating, so different primary schools participate on rotation throughout the year, but a fantastic opportunity for primary school students. They received a presentation and were awarded with their certificates, but up in that main gallery, the beautiful main gallery upstairs, so from a young age being exposed to the beauty of the art gallery in our collection and then being able to exhibit their works as well, so that's well worth support.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to the 30th of May, I think the Thursday, the 30th of May, I did attend the Launceston competitions and compared the contemporary music evening for junior and senior categories, which was an enjoyable experience. I'd just like to commend the organisers and the volunteers, especially with Launceston competitions. It's obviously a huge amount of work, and they've been going for 117 years, as everyone would know. Quite an achievement. Still having a reasonable head of hair for those not sort of, listening at the moment. I was able to let my hair down and compete a little with some of the youth there, the rock and rollers. But, it certainly was good to be involved in that. And the next day, on Friday, I did attend, as did the Mayor, Councillor Mackenzie and our absent Councillor Spencer, the Tasmanian Aboriginal Centre in Charles Street, and sat in on a Palawakani presentation, the language that is in use and continually developed by the Aboriginal community. It's a potent symbol of their culture and their ongoing commitment to their cultural practice and their identity. And I will just make a note at this point that they will also be, during NAIDOC week, which is the 7th and 14th of July, having a flag raising on the Monday of that week, and I'm sure each councillor will be invited to that ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other council reports? Can I have a councillor bring forward 14.1, because I've just realised a number of people still waiting patiently, and I apologise, we should have done it a bit earlier, so we'll do it now. Councillor Soward, move, seconded. Councillor Finlay, all those in favour? That's carried. So I'll have 14.1 now, and we'll come back to the others in a minute. So notice of motion from Councillor Dawkins, and we do have a number of speakers. Rosalie Saville.
My name is Rosalie Saville from 6 Trotsford Crescent in Launceston. I represent the group GREAT, and we thank you firstly for all of you for responding to our request for my submission. The new muzzle-free status implemented by the Tasmanian Government in December 2018 has seen greyhounds recognised as the wonderful gentle dogs they are, and because accredited gap and Brightside greyhounds are no longer required to wear a muzzle, the adoption rate has now increased by 20%. Currently, in excess of 300 greyhounds per annum are being adopted. Add to this the around 2,500 already adopted and their lifespan of approximately 12 years. We will see the demand for exercise areas for them increase dramatically. Greyhounds are trained and conditioned to run at their maximum speed until they exit the industry at only 2 to 4 years of age. It just seems so unfair that the opportunity to run at full speed is cut short when they are adopted, as we have no access to the slipping tracks available in other states. It is also not healthy for their finely tuned athletic bodies. Greyhounds go through a rigorous assessment program after they exit the racing industry to ensure their suitability to live with small dogs and cats and often chickens and other farm animals. My greyhound Spock lives with an elderly cat and a dachshund, and is happy to be bossed around by both of them. Why greyhound-only areas? Because greyhounds have a very thin skin and a sparse coat, and an attack from another breed can be catastrophic. As a result, many die from an injury that most other breeds would recover from. Because their laid-back nature, the fact they are rarely bark and they sleep for most of the day, they lend themselves to apartment and city living, making it more important for them to have a safe area to chase a ball, stretch their legs and get their heart rate up and have fun like any other dog. Then it's back to the couch for a nap. Sorry. To those that have a pet dog, imagine your dog never has the opportunity to run after its 3rd birthday. It's not healthy, and mentally or physically. With this in mind, we implore you to earmark an area now to be set aside for the future so that greyhound pet owners are not waiting for years for their first off-leash area when the law is amended by our government. We do hope Launceston City Council to lead the way for Tasmania and have a greyhound-specific off-leash area to keep them healthy. Thank you.
Andrea Bonner from South Launceston. Thank you all for the opportunity to speak today. I have actually adopted 2 greyhounds, and I'm also a foster carer for greyhounds as well. So what this means is that when they're rescued from the racing industry, they'll come into my home, and I will teach them what it's like to be a pet. So I will teach them how to go up and down stairs, how to walk on a lead, toilet train them, but most of all, I will teach them how to feel loved and that their lives matter. My favourite thing to do when fostering a new greyhound is to take it to the beach. They've never seen the ocean before in their lives, and I unclip the lead and I just let them run. Seeing a greyhound run free is just pure joy and sheer happiness. It's an experience that always brings me to tears for the first time. Greyhounds need the room to run free and to stretch out, and this isn't possible in the average person's backyard. Not having the freedom of a dog park, like every other breed does, it can play a negative role in someone's decision whether to adopt a greyhound or not. So with that in mind, I ask that we please set aside a piece of land for when the law is changed so that we may legally be allowed to let our greyhounds run free, and that it also makes it an easier and more appealing option for people to adopt a greyhound. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Sarah Redmond.
Mayor, Deputy Mayor and Councillor, Sarah Redmond from South Launceston. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today for greyhound off-leash areas. Our family too is new owner of a greyhound called Speedy, which is a bit ironic because he never actually raced. We just found that out. But anyway, he's 4 years old and we've had him for 3 months, and we have had dogs for years, usually from the RSPCA. We always like to try and help animals. And when I learned from Rosie, met Spock, well, all our family fell in love with greyhounds. As you've heard, their nature's beautiful, and we couldn't love Speedy more. They have needs, as you've heard. They need to be able to run and socialise, and we almost didn't adopt a greyhound because we were concerned about not having them able to run. And currently, every now and then, we take Speedy to larger private properties where he can run. And as Andrea said, it's just a beautiful thing to see them run free. 3 to 5 minutes and they're done for the day. That's all it takes. I suppose I just want to implore you for the opportunity here with the law's pending change for Launceston to lead the way in terms of designating a greyhound off-leash area, first council in Tasmania, and help that flow and effect around the state. The other need, of course, is there are so many greyhounds coming through that do need to be adopted, retired greyhounds, and it would make it more attractive to owners like ourselves if we knew that we could take them to parks to run free. And my son, who's 11 years old, Cameron, just wanted to say to you when I told you I was here today, he just said, "Mummy, can you please tell them that Speedy is a kind dog and that he's much happier if he can run every day." So thank you.
Thank you. That's all the speakers I have. Any other speakers? No, thank you. So Councillor Dawkins moves the motion. Just seconded. Councillor Stosnicek. Councillor Dawkins, you wish to speak?
I do. Thank you, Mayor. Well, I did spend some time writing this speech, but I think in this instance I'm going to let the community speak for themselves. Rosalie, Andrea and Sarah all have experience of having greyhounds. I am a mere animal welfare advocate and don't expect to be able to speak on their behalf. All the points have been made. We do understand that there will be an amendment to the Dog Control Act that will be coming in this term of Parliament this year, I believe. I think we should lobby the state government to ensure that it does come to, because why not? It's going to be a couple of lines, it's going to go through, the upper house will accept it, and then we can move on with this process to be able to integrate greyhounds fully into our community. Legat also, I think, could do with our support to understand that other jurisdictions could also make this change. And I think it's up to experts in this field, greyhound owners, people who work with GAP, Brightside, other organisations who have a stake in this, to make a decision about what would be the appropriate amount of space. I understand only 1 or 2, 3 greyhounds at most could be in the slipping track. It's a pretty small piece of land we're talking about. I don't believe it would need to be policed. We don't police dog parks now. Why would we need to police a greyhound off-leash area? So thank you so much for your contribution. It means a lot to know the community are engaged with this process, and I hope I get support from all councillors today.
Thank you. Councillor Stosnicek.
Well, I'm not sure how much to say now. Now Andrea's not reading her notes. I too did a lot of research. So I'll say a few things. So as the community has become more aware of the plight of greyhounds and the high euthanasia, that's a hard word, rates as a consequence of the racing industry, more and more people are opening their lives and their homes to greyhounds and welcoming into their family. This is fantastic and means we're seeing greyhounds out and about in the community with their owners. However, due to strict controls, they need to remain off-leash in public areas. This means they lose the opportunity for a proper off-leash run. Greyhounds, like any dog, love to run, and whilst they do not require a great deal of exercise, it seems unfair to deny the dogs this simple pleasure. I think it's imperative that we lobby the government to change the legislation to allow greyhounds to be exercised off-leash in specifically designated areas. In addition, I would like Council to identify possible sites that we could utilise for this purpose. Greyhounds have historically been a casualty of the racing industry. Let's now welcome them into our community and recognise them as the loving, loyal and beautiful pets that they can be if given the opportunity.
Thank you. Councillor Soward.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. And it was really terrific to hear from the three speakers with their passion and advocacy around this. And the image that Andrea spoke about with the dog on the beach was just terrific. You know, just a really terrific one. I took my dog to the beach at Port Sorell and I caught him at Launceston. But anyway, that's all right. He's only got little legs, let me tell you. Jokes aside, I think this is a pretty good thing. And I did say to Councillor Dawkins, I'm very supportive of what she's trying to do. I did actually, sometimes when you read something a few times, I actually just needed to make sure I had it sequentially right. So as I see it, as it's presented to us, this is just us being on the front foot, which I think is really, really good. We're not acting, off just going and doing something out of kilter with everything else. We're just being prepared, which is terrific. Advocating and lobbying the state government, which I think is terrific for something like this. It's not an overly difficult amendment, as has been pointed out. I think I love animals, and I think it's a really great thing that a breed of animal that's bred for a certain purpose that perhaps in times past has met a fairly sad end is now being adopted and welcomed into people's families and homes, and I think it's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I've seen plenty of photos of Rosalie's dog popping up in my newsfeed on Facebook, having a great time. But just it's great to see that this is a really positive thing that's coming from what was a very tragic end to a beautiful animal. The only thing that I'll say, and I say this with all sincerity and not being flippant, the advocacy that your group's shown in being here today, I think, is wonderful. What I would ask for you to continue to do is to continue to advocate. So when the state government agrees to this and these areas start to be created around the state, I'd love for you to advocate, as you have done today, because one of the things, the 12 of us get sitting around this table, the minute we go and do something, people say, what are you building that for? What are you putting the rates up? What are you building that for? So tell your story, get that message out there, happy to support it.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, things are definitely changing, and I was thrilled to learn that the State Treasurer had actually made a special meeting time to meet Spock, Rosie's greyhound. So I look forward to that occasion as well. Unfortunately, he wasn't welcome today, but perhaps into the future we can find a time. But I think this is exciting, and I think we are leading the way, and I congratulate Councillor Dawkins and all those advocates who have worked so hard over the journey to advocate for and on behalf of greyhounds, and now to see the loyal companions that they can become for families is really exciting. I enjoyed over the week listening of the history of the muzzle-free and listening to the way that greyhounds, I guess, are integrated into homes and into suburbia and into families. So some really lovely stories, and I look forward to supporting this motion, and more importantly look forward to seeing how we as a council might be able to work with representatives such as those here today, Brightside and Gap, so that we're ready in terms of the design of the space. If it's 50 by 200 metres and it's got the appropriate fencing and the appropriate controls, it would be great to be ready and to be able to be not only the first who's putting aside land, but the first that opens that first park as well.
Thank you. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I rise to support this motion and to just note that the work that's being done, and I know that I did see in the mall a couple of weeks ago. Is that the GAP program? No, that's yeah. Yes, and just addressing that issue that it is a travesty. Discarding of animals that are no longer of use is a wonderful thing, and to see it spreading out through the community. I know of quite a few people who have adopted greyhounds. There seems to be more and more people all the time. It makes you start to wonder whether maybe you'd consider doing it yourself, really, which is a great thing that they've achieved. If you're getting people to that point where they actually, it wouldn't be of something I would have thought of a few years ago. So, wonderful work, and I wholeheartedly support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Cox.
Thanks, Mayor. I love it when common sense comes. I really enjoy it. This is just common sense. It's so obvious. Rosalie, Andrea and Sarah, congratulations. You're great advocates. Take the advice of Councillor Sowd. I wouldn't recommend that on any occasion, but in this instance I would. Be an advocate right around the state. There are 29 councils. Just getting us up isn't enough. I'm assuming that you will get support from us. I'll be very disappointed if you don't. Tell your son we will do everything we can to make your dog happy, Speedy. I've never had much to do with greyhounds, actually. Oh, I did once. I think it cost me about $10. But other than that, look, what you're doing is terrific. You're great advocates for it. And keep up the good work, because we need people like you. Well, actually, we don't. The animals do.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Dawkins, wish to close? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. That is carried. Thank you. We now go back to questions from councillors. Councillor Sowd.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. I'll just a little bit of a preface before I get to the question. I understand, obviously, there are some sums of money set aside in our budget to deal with this. But just this week, the Hobart City Council has installed brand new showers and toilets, plus a fully equipped parenting room and an accredited changing places high needs room are now available for people's use at the Argyle Street car park. So this has been something that's come through St Giles. Could we please make contact with St Giles Society, who have worked with the Hobart City Council on this issue, to explore the ways this initiative could be realised here in Launceston?
Yeah, I think so. That's fine. Yep, that's done. Any other questions from councillors? Walker? Councillor Walker?
A couple of months ago I did ask the question about the flags in the mall and whether they would be being replaced, or I think there was some talk that it may be relocated to the Civic Square. Is the General Manager able to update on that?
On notice. I thought it was responded to, but
We'll take it on notice.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? We'll move on. Pedestrian and Bike Committee, 12.1. Move Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Finlay. Councillor Mackenzie? Councillor Finlay? Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors that are present at the table. The council workshop, 13.1. Councillor Finlay moved. Seconded. Councillor Harris. Wish to speak to it? Councillor Finlay, Councillor Harris. Any councillor wish to speak to it? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Can't miss an opportunity. Just wanted to highlight how wonderful it was to again have another presentation from Design Tasmania and to see the wonderful work that they are undertaking there and in close synergy with the overarching goals of our cultural strategy. And I really look forward to continuing to watch that space, obviously under the watchful eye of Councillor Dawkins as our nominated representative. I think that is really going to be a significant player, not only in terms of arts and culture, but all of the ways that we're trying to bring in other elements, tourism, you know, community access, etc. There's lots and lots of things that I think we could learn from Design Tasmania and the work that they're doing there.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Actually, Mayor, Deputy Mayor has reminded me, and I spoke briefly to the General Manager after one of the workshops. When we get requests for workshop inclusion or we make invitations for workshop inclusions, some of the items that we receive, there is an item on this agenda called deputations, and we haven't for some time received a deputation. I know the take-up of the community reports has been really valuable, but for instance, the presentation of Design Tasmania, and even the when we have with due regard to the commercial in confidence nature of it, like the Tourism Northern Tasmania and others, the stakeholders that we have, it would be good for the community also for those to be publicly reported through the deputation item in the council agenda, instead of perhaps otherwise as a workshop.
Are you closing at the same time? Or anyone else want to speak? Did you want to close?
No, that's it.
I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present at the table. We move on to, if I've got it right, 19.1. I think I forgot to say we said to finish the planning. Sorry, did I say that? I said that. Sorry? Can't hear.
You said that.
I did say it, so that's good. I thought I did. Oh, thank you. So, rates and charges policy. Moving, Councillor Mackenzie. Seconded, Councillor Finlay. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I think the only purpose for really speaking to it is just to acknowledge the work in doing it, and it's just really, I guess, a restating of our policy now to reflect the changes that have gone on in relation to independent living units, which were previously rated and we were then rebating, whereas now, because of the cases that have so far that have recently been held in relation to that, the charitable status is there, and therefore there is no ability for us to charge rates.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? I'll put the motion. Those in favour, please raise your hand. That is all councillors present. That is carried. 19.2, the budget estimates. Councillor Mackenzie, Councillor Finlay. Thanks for coming, you two. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. Well, I guess that really this is off the back of workshops. It's off the back of public consultation. We've taken into consideration the public consultation that took place and responded to those people that asked questions or put forward things of interest for the budget. As a consequence of that, I believe that all things that we've spoken about in workshops and so forth before deal with what the outcome of the budget is today.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay.
Only to reinforce what Councillor Mackenzie said, and in addition to the fact that it's been heavily consulted, it's been developed over a long period of time, it is the outflow of the significant strategic work that's occurred from the Council in terms of the strategic financial plan and the strategic asset management plan, the long-term financial plan and the strategic asset management plan. And as a result, the City of Launceston, I think, can be proud of what has happened and what we're working on going forward, and that we're in a fantastic financial position and in a position to deliver service to our community the best possible way, given regard for the restrictions and the considerations that we have to make in doing that. But I think we're, it demonstrates a responsible council in a great position.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to rise really to congratulate the approach that Director Louise and Paul have taken in not only educating us, but bringing us along on the journey, and the way that the information has been able to be broken down, and the educative role, without it being too cumbersome, has been really appreciated. And I really wanted to acknowledge that and say how much I appreciate it, including the hotspotting maps. But everything that you go away and provide to us is certainly appreciated and helps in our understanding of all that we're trying to achieve. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Mackenzie, wish to close?
I will briefly, because I guess probably one thing I did not speak about was really noting that this year we'll have an operating loss, and I guess that needs to be taken into account for the last 2 or 3 years of operating surpluses, which means I think an average of a 1.5 million, I think, profit over the last 3 or 4 years. So we note that we're operating in a slightly negative sense, but given the good performance in past years, we're able to cope with that and therefore manage our rate increases to our residents to an acceptable level.
Thank you. That was a closing, wasn't it, so? All those... can I put the motion? All those in favour? That is all councillors present. That is carried. So 19.3, the budget rating framework. Moved Councillor Mackenzie, seconded Councillor Finlay. Wish to speak to it, Councillor Mackenzie?
I'm going to say this is really a flow on from the previous process which we just approved, noting that rates go up and down based on valuations that are done, and I guess we've had some valuation information that's now flowed through, which means there's a bit of a rebalancing of what the rate per dollar is for each different area, which is really what's reflecting some of the increases, noting that some, like residential, have actually gone down.
Thank you. Councillor Finlay. Any other councillor wish to speak? I am just going to say this is the most important, these last three, the most important decision as a council we do make. And I agree the process is fantastic, but it's disappointing that there's nobody in the gallery when we do this one. When we other issues, we have lots of people. So I think the people obviously are very happy with what's going on. Maybe I can say that. Councillor Mackenzie, do you wish to close? No, you're speaking. You were speaking. No, you don't want to close. I'll put the motion. Those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. We now have a motion that we go into closed council, moved by Councillor Cox, seconded by Deputy Mayor. Everybody hands go up. All those in favour, please raise your hand. That is carried. Thank you by all people at the table. So
Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks.
no, thanks, councillors. We're in open. We need a motion. And the motion is that we endorse the decisions taken in closed. To move, Councillor Soward, second Deputy Mayor. All those in favour, please raise your hand. And that is all councillors present. That is carried. Thank you very much. We'll close the meeting. Can I just say...
Streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1 p.m. local time. Streaming is paused during breaks. Audio streaming of today's council meeting starts at 1